J'ouvre maintenant la réunion.
Welcome to meeting number 122 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics.
Standing Order 1083H and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, May 7th. The committee is commencing its study of compliance of a minister to the Conflict of Interest Act. Before I begin, I just want to remind everyone again about the earpieces. Make sure that when they're not in use, that they are on the stickers on the tables so that we don't have feedback for the interpreters as well. And I want to thank everyone for their cooperation. I also want to state that all of the interventions are to go through the chair this morning. I want to make sure that there is enough time for answers and questions. I don't want any interaction that where we have two people speaking at the same time. I'm going to give equal amount of time to the questioners as I will to the minister to respond, but I don't want people jumping in because we have to be mindful of interpretation, not the least of which is the fact that the right information is getting interpreted, but also, again, to further protect our interpreters from any potential injury. So, with that being said, I want to welcome the Honourable Randy Boissonnault, Minister, for appearing for the first hour. Mr. Boissonnault, you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Please go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chair.
I
just have a quick question.
On a point of order, go ahead.
Just before we begin, I have a quick question regarding the question of privilege motion that was being debated last meeting. I'll be quick. Page 154 of third edition, procedure of practice clearly outlines process by which a question of privilege is dealt with at committee. In the interest of time, we'll forego a recap of everything that transpired up to this point. I'll also not read the entire passage, but I want to highlight one line. The motion is debatable, amendable, and will have priority of consideration in the committee. And in my opinion, debate on that motion should have superseded the agenda today. However, out of respect for our witness and other committee members, I will abide by the agenda as published. So my question to you, sir, is will you provide the opportunity for debate to continue on the question of privilege motion at Thursday's meeting?
Okay, so why don't we get through this, and then I can answer that at the end of today's meeting. I'll leave a little bit of time with the minister, and I'll let you know what the plan is. Okay?
Thank you.
Is that fair enough? Thank you. Minister Boissonnault, you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, sir.
And thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to be here at committee to address the innuendo and misinformation that has been spread by the opposition over the last few weeks. Mr. Chair, it's the nature of partisan politics that we have vigorous and even fiery debates. It's the job of the opposition to hold the government to account, and I understand this dynamic and I respect it. However, even the rhetoric of a hyper-partisan Conservative Party needs to at least take into account the actual facts of a situation. So let's begin with an essential fact. Canada has one of the strictest ethics regimes in the world for elected officials, and that is exactly what Canadians expect. I've always conducted myself in an ethical manner that follows the spirit and the letter of those rules. On that note, I'm grateful to the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner for reviewing the claims made by Mr. Barrett and the media, and for the Commissioner's conclusion that there is no need for his office to look into this matter further. The impartial, independent, and non-partisan body in charge of the rules has made its decision. That should be respected. À ce propos, je remercie le commissaire au conflit d'intérêts.
On that note, I am grateful to the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner for reviewing the claims made by Mr. Barrett and the media, and for his conclusion that there is no need for his office to look into this matter further. The impartial, independent, and non-partisan body in charge of the rules has made its decision, and that should be respected. I have always followed my obligations under the Conflict of Interest Act and worked with the Office of the Conflict of Interest Commissioner. Mr. Chair, when I was elected in 2021 and appointed to Cabinet, I began the process of organizing my professional affairs in accordance with the Conflict of Interest Act.
Working with the Commissioner's office, I placed my company's Xenix and a numbered company that holds investments under the management of a third party as required by the Act. To act as the third party, I chose Ms. Kirsten Poon, who, in addition to being a former employee, has also been a friend of mine for more than a decade and was a person whom I trusted to manage things. My past business and personal relationship with Ms. Poon was and continues to be reported to the Ethics Commissioner's office as required by the Act. I would also note that since my election, Xenext has ceased day-to-day operations, and Ms. Poon acts as effectively as an administrator for the companies to ensure that needed tax filing and other paperwork is filed. Despite innuendo to the contrary, I am not a lobbyist. I've never been a lobbyist, and I've never had any interest in being a lobbyist. À l'automne 2021,
In the fall of 2021, as part of the finalization of my affairs as a private citizen, my lawyer informed Global Health Imports that I was stepping down as a director. As Global News articles indicate, it is a company's responsibility to update the relevant federal and provincial business registries in the event of a change of director. However, as this was not done in a timely manner, my lawyer filed the necessary update to ensure that the situation was resolved, which is reflected in both registers. Since my election, I have played no role in GHI's operations. I have no knowledge of the financial or operational status of this company, nor of any of Mr. Anderson's ongoing business ventures.
That some Conservatives have been trying to spread regarding these circumstances. First, there has been much innuendo about the fact that Edmonton International Airport, which was a former client, had meetings with staff in other ministers' offices and also received grants from the Department of Transportation and Prairie's Can since I took office. I want to be clear. I in no way facilitated such meetings. I would also note that the Edmonton International Airport is the 5th largest airport in the country, as well as a major hub for the movement of goods and people. Deuxièmement, il a été noté que j'ai décidé de devenir.
Secondly, it has been noted that I have received income from Ms. Poon's Nevis Group company over the past 2 years. Mr. Chair, I must say that this is known because I disclosed this income to the Ethics Commissioner and then in my public statement in accordance with the rules. I also made it clear that the income I received and disclosed was all for work that I did between 2019 and 2021 as a private citizen. None of this income came from work carried out since I took office, and none was related to the lobbying work of Ms. Poon's company, Nevis Group.
Surprised to me, Mr. Chair, that the Conservatives have tried to double down on innuendo and misdirection to try to distract from all of these facts. It appears, unfortunately, to be a deliberate attempt to mislead Canadians by portraying what has been fully disclosed to the Ethics Commissioner as scandalous when no such scandal exists. For them, following the rules, being open and transparent, meeting all the obligations, and having the Ethics Commissioner see no need to evaluate my business affairs are simply inconvenient obstacles that can get in the way of a social media clip. Let's move on to questions, Mr. Chair, after which I'll get straight back to work serving Edmontonians, Albertans, and all Canadians.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Boissonneau. And before I go to Mr. Barrett, I'm just going to remind you, sir, that you are here today because of a motion that was passed by this committee, a majority of members on this committee. Mr. Barrett, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Minister, there's fraud and another Randy in a partner call at your company. What's the other Randy's last name?
So, Mr. Barrett, I do not know the name of that person, as I stated in my opening statements. And before at committee, I have no relationship, no operational role with GHI. I do not know that person in question. That person is not me.
What's your percentage stake in the company?
As has been disclosed in my disclosure to the Commission of Ethics, it is 50% stake in GHI that is held in my holding company.
Who are the partners at the company?
I do not know. It is Mr. Anderson, to my knowledge, is the only administrator of that company.
So,
I have no connection other than holding the shares to that company, Mr. Barrett.
holding half of the shares.
Half of the shares are in my numbered company, as disclosed to the Commissioner of Ethics.
Do you know who holds the balance of the shares?
When I was involved, the last time I looked, it was Mr. Anderson.
So it's your understanding that you and Randy Boissonneau and Mr. Anderson are 50-50 partners in the company.
That is not correct. The shares are held by 2256956 Alberta Limited.
Who owns that numbered
I
company?
do.
Cute.
It's not cute, Mr. Barrett.
There's a question about this other Randy that's been reported. I know the contention, sir, is that you'd like for this to be something that the opposition has created, but this is reported in the media. And the media has uncovered a number of things, including text message exchanges with someone who's named by one of your partners as a partner, and they refer to Randy. And no last name of that Randy is available. The only Randy we know that's involved with the company is a minister in the Trudeau government. Who were the partners in that company in 2022?
I do not have that information, Mr. Barrett, but let me correct the record, Mr. Chair. To your question, I'll go through you, Mr. Chair. I am not the person in those texts. Mr. Anderson confirmed that it's not me. And I have a quote from the article that you're talking about, Mr. Barrett, which is from the Gowie Group, which says, "We have had no direct communication with Mr. Boissonneau at any point in our dealings with Stephen and the companies because I have had no active role in GHI since I was elected in 2021.
Okay. You said publicly you didn't have anything to do with Stephen Anderson's business deals on behalf of your PPE company, Global Health Imports. Is that right?
I have had no active role in GHI since I was elected. And Mr. Barrett, you said yourself in your question this morning, Mr. Chair, may I answer?
Chair, I gave.
hang on a sec.
So let's stop the clock. Okay.
Go ahead. I'm going to ask Mr. Barrett to continue. He has another question. Minister,
But
prepare
Chair,
for an answer.
but
go ahead.
On the way the meeting's going to run, I gave Mr. Boissonneau more than twice the amount of time to respond to both of my previous questions than I spent in asking the questions. So if I have a short question and the minister wants to run the clock, that's obviously not going to demonstrate fairness in the
I think I
proceedings.
I made that pretty clear at the top of the meeting, Mr. Barrett, that my expectation today is that as members ask questions, an equal amount of time is going to be given for those responses, Minister, and I ask that all members respect that. I'm not going to be the timekeeper here, other than the 6 minutes, but if I see that a member is going a little bit off in terms of time, then I will intervene. Mr. Barrett?
How much time?
You got 3 minutes and 16 seconds. Go ahead.
Related to deals with the Gowie Group, you didn't have anything to do with the alleged wire fraud?
Mr. Barrett, I have been very clear that I've had no operational dealings with GHI since I was elected, and you, sir, indicated off the start that the Randy in the article was not me.
So that company alleges that you were involved. Are they telling the truth?
That company is not, they're not correct because I've had no correspondence from them, and Mr. Anderson indicates very clearly in this morning's article that Randy is not me.
So we have text messages implicating you, sir, in this wire fraud, and it was carried out by your business partner to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And one of them reads, and I quote, "What is going on? I just received this from Randy." It's 1314 MST and 1514 EST. It literally takes 10 seconds to complete a transfer. I'm telling you, we are not allocating like this. Please reach out and see what the reason is now. You assured me this was done this morning, first thing, and allowed you to hold this stock today. It's midday and nothing is completed. I'm calling Felix to discuss. Be available for a partner call in 15 minutes, end quote. Sir, it seems like you're trying to conceal your involvement in a matter of fraud. Why?
Michael, Mr. Chair, that is completely beyond the pale. It's completely false, and it's not true. The article states very clearly that the Gowie Group had no contact with me, which is true, and Mr. Anderson indicated that this is a different Randy. Mr. Barrett, your first name is Michael. Mr. Cooper's first name is Michael. Are we to confuse your two identities here at committee when you ask questions of me that are spurious in nature?
Well,
there's more than one
Mr.
Randy
Chair,
here.
I look forward, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Boissonneau being in opposition and having the opportunity to...
He asked a very long question, Mr. Chair. He asked a very long question. I have more seconds.
And I realize that, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So there
Mr.
are
Chair,
other,
I have time on the clock to answer that question.
There are other texts as well that outline how quickly you wanted this wire transfer to go through.
Mr. Barrett,
And
that is not me, and you cannot state that for the record.
Can
That is
we,
simply not true, Mr.
can
Chair.
we just
That
hang
is
on a
not true,
sec.
Mr. Chair.
I'm going to, look, I thought I made my expectation very clear at the beginning that questions will be asked and time will be given to respond to that. I am going to Mr. Barrett. Mr. Barrett, Minister, please don't intervene. I'm going to ask the same of the questioners as well. Mr. Barrett, go ahead. You've got 1 minute and 12 seconds, sir.
Like the lack of respect for procedure at committee, we've seen the same lack of adherence to ethics rules. The minister talked about Canada's stringent ethics rules. His government, of course, including Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, has twice been found guilty of breaking those laws, and that's why we have questions about alleged law breaking by our witness, by the minister. The company has been trying to get the money back, the company that was defrauded of $500,000 from your business. Where did the money from the
Mr. Chair.
chair.
It is.
A chair.
Point of
I-
order, Chair.
He is not stating facts, and I
But he
cannot let
didn't finish
falsehoods
his
go, Mr.
question.
Chair.
You're going to have ample opportunity to
30 seconds was
answer.
the length
I
of
know
my
you're
question.
protecting his
And
clips, Mr. Chair,
no,
but
I'm
he
not
is stating
actually.
falsehoods.
I'm not actually, Mr. Boissonneau. I'm
So we have a
actually.
corrupt minister from a corrupt
Ask
government.
not your question.
That is
Point
simply
of
beyond
order.
Mr. Chair, that is outrageous behavior by that
Mr.
member.
Barrett,
Can I have my time? I've asked for 2 points of order.
I'm going to go on your point of order. Go ahead, Mr. Brock.
I have never, in my almost 3 years of public service, seen such disrespect
Point of
by
order.
a minister
Point of order.
for the procedures
Point of
here
order.
at committee. He's constantly talking over the witness, and now he's talking over the chair.
I've got
It
your
is
point of
conduct
order.
unbecoming.
I've got your
order.
point of order, Mr. Brock. I appreciate that. Mr. Barrett, you were at 34 seconds in your intervention. So I'm going to ask you to ask your question. And
Point of order.
Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Housefather. on
Mr.
point of
Chair, referring to someone as corrupt is unparliamentary. I would ask that you order it be withdrawn.
order. Sorry, ask that I order it what?
I would ask that you ask Mr. Barrett to withdraw those comments. That is unparliamentary to refer to someone as corrupt.
Yeah, Mr. Barrett, I am going to ask that you withdraw those comments, please.
Alleged corruption by a corrupt government.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. You have had,
That was not a withdrawal, Mr. Chair. That was a doubling down.
we've got a point of order from Mr. Villemure. Go ahead, Mr. Villemure. Allez, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Tous les
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All committee members have accepted to hear from Mr. Boissonneau so that he can explain the situation. And I can't currently understand because everyone's talking on top of each other. That's what I said when we started.
I don't want this to descend into a point where, everybody's talking over each other. And I'm going to enforce that from this. I've been enforcing it, but I'm going to enforce it from this point forward. It's just, it means that we're going to be wasting our time here and not being able to ask the questions that we want. Mr. Barrett, you've had 34 seconds. Do you have a question for Mr. Boissonneau? Because I want to give him an equal amount of time. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Through you, Chair, we'll give the minister an opportunity for transparency. For a first, Minister, will you provide this committee a copy of the letter notifying in writing that you wanted to be removed as a director from this company? And further, will you provide any financial records related to this company? Will you provide them to the committee?
Mr. Chair, there is a well-established practice done by the Ethics Commissioner that every single member around this table has to go through. The standards are higher for parliamentary secretaries and ministers. I have followed that process to the letter. All of those documents were provided to the Commissioner of Ethics. And Mr. Chair, the Ethics Commissioner sent me and Mr. Barrett a letter indicating that there was no need. He took the decision that there's no need to look into my business affairs, no need to evaluate them. I have followed the letter to the rule to the letter.
Thank you, Mr. Boissonneau. Mr. Barrett. Ms. Damoff, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. And before I start, I just have a point of order. Mr. Cooper has just called me disgusting, and I would ask that he please remove that from. I mean, it's not appropriate.
I'm sorry. I was dealing with other
point-
issues.
point of order as
I didn't
well.
hear
Point of
it.
order.
I didn't hear it, Ms. Damoff.
He's done it
I'm
twice,
sorry.
Chair.
Okay.
Point of
Well,
order,
I didn't
Mr.
hear
Chair.
it, so
Those who
I
live-
apologize.
Mr. Chair, those who live in glass houses should be very
Okay,
careful
that's
about
not a
throwing
point of
stones.
order, Mr.
It
Brock.
is, because
Thank you.
Ms. Damoff used the very same language towards my colleague, Mr. Cooper. I heard it very clearly on more than one occasion, Chair.
So the chair did not hear it because I was obviously busy dealing with some other issues. So I'm going to ask Ms. Damoff that you continue for 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair.
So as to not interrupt her time.
On a point of order, Mr. Barrett.
At the conclusion of, it's a practice at other committees and this one in the past, that when there's a request for documents made, that there's confirmation by the clerk to the witness the information that's been requested. So is the committee to understand that the witness will provide the documents that were requested to the committee or not?
Mr. Boissonneau, will you provide those documents that have been requested by Mr. Barrett?
Mr. Chair, I was very clear in my answer. Any documents related to my affairs as a private citizen before becoming a public office holder have been provided to the Ethics Commissioner and his team, and they have looked at those documents, and the Ethics Commissioner has included there is no need to evaluate my business affairs, point à la ligne.
Okay. So if the committee feels compelled to request those documents, you can do so when you have the floor, Mr. Barrett. Go ahead, Ms. Damoff, please.
Thank you, Chair. On May 7th, CSIS reported that disinformation is the biggest threat to Canadians, and more than 84% of Canadians are somewhat concerned with this issue. And I find it really, I'm really disheartened that the Conservatives would prefer to go on a witch hunt against a minister of the Crown versus continuing and finishing our study on misinformation and disinformation. Mr. Boissonnault, when you become a minister, is the procedure involved with documentation the same as a member of Parliament? Because I would note none of the opposition members have ever had to complete the documentation. As a parliamentary secretary, I have. I know it's quite extensive. Could you maybe discuss that?
Absolutely, Ms. Damoff. When you become a public office holder, as you have experienced, there's a much different approach from just sending in your annual report as a member of Parliament. There are financial documents. Your partner, your spouse, your significant other, your common law partner get scoped into the process, and it is an intense process so that you comply by the 120-day mark. And in my case, we had to figure out what to do with one holding company, one active business. I got advice from the Commissioner of Ethics that I needed to have a third party, went all through that. And I think the other thing that's really important, Ms. Damoff, is it's my financials, it's investments, it's everything related to my personal life. It's the personal finances of my life and my partner's life that the Commissioner gets to see. And I don't think any of us would want to be poking our noses in other people's personal financial business. That's not, we have a different system. And we have one of the strictest ethics regimes in the world. And so the other thing I'll say before I get you to your next question is it's not just a one-time thing. It's a continual process. I have to constantly decide and make sure that we're complying with the Act, and I recuse myself from nominations and appointments all the time so that I stay on the right side of the Act.
And you have to file annually the reports, and in addition, as part of the conditions when you file those reports, you can't have any knowledge of what's going on. I recall I couldn't even hold shares. I had to move all of any stocks that I owned. I had to either move them into a Bryant trust or have mutual funds. So, and this needs to be filed annually. So to imply that you are somehow still involved would indicate that you've contravened the Act, and yet the Commissioner has gone through your documents and has vetted it and said no, that you didn't. Is that not correct?
That is absolutely correct. The Commissioner has said there is no need to evaluate my business affairs.
So I want to ask you a personal question, Minister Boissonnault. Sure. When the Conservatives go on these witch hunts and say things like you're corrupt, or call you disgusting, or say that you're part of a corrupt government, what impact does that have on you and your family?
Well, I can tell you we've had people parked outside of my house for 6 weeks with a threatening vehicle that switches out every 3 to 4 days to comply with the bylaws, that whatever Pierre Poilievre says in the House of Commons gets written all over those windows. And my partner didn't sign up for that, and neither did anybody on my block. And it comes directly from the anger and the fear that the Conservative Party is spreading in this country. And I can tell you, Ms. Damoff, it breaks my heart that you have made the choice that you have made to no longer serve your community and our country, because you are a phenomenal parliamentarian and an amazing parliamentary secretary. And when truth and reason and facts leave this place, it damages democracy. And the decisions made by people around this table have life-altering consequences for people who do not put their name on a ballot. And I do not think that everybody around this table treats Canadians with the respect and care that they should when they become a member of Parliament.
Do you think Canadians expect more of members of Parliament? There's only 338 of it here. I consider it a great privilege to be serving the constituents of Oakville, North Burlington. And when colleagues start accusing others of lying, which is in essence what was happening during the previous testimony, when despite your answers, you were being contradicted by Mr. Barrett. Do you think that it behooves us to behave in a more respectful way to one another?
I think in another time, in another place, with a different Conservative Party, a letter from the Ethics Commissioner clearing a member of Parliament, regardless of party, would have been enough to move on to committee business. And I don't know what's happened at this committee, that it is embroiled in partisan attacks and it can't get onto its own business. But it's a sad day when that's the case. And I can tell you, Pam, what people say to me in the doors. They say whether you're a member of Parliament, a member of the Legislative Assembly, or a councillor, or a school trustee, we elect you all to get along and to get stuff done for us. And games playing and name calling is not what we want to see. And I was on the doors last weekend and I heard it again. And so we can all hold ourselves to a higher standard. And I hope that we get there in this committee and across government.
I will say that in the past, I used to find committees were the one place where collaboration would take place and where we were able to accomplish, I would say, really great things. We have a study on misinformation and disinformation that I think could be helpful for Canadians, and instead this committee regularly gets deadlocked on the latest gotcha moment. And it's unfortunate that we're stuck in the mud because of accusations. And I thank you for being here today,
Thank
Minister.
you, Ms. Damoff. Thank you, Mr. Boissonneau. Monsieur Villemure, pour 6 minutes. Commencez, s'il vous plaît.
You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for being with us today. My constituents in Trois-Rivières understand my past as an ethicist, and many have followed your testimony here today, and they're wondering what's going on. I would like to give you 2 minutes out of my 6 minutes to tell us more about what brought us here today. That's a great question, Mr. Villemure. In part because of what Ms. Damoff has said, the Conservatives want clips for social media. I re-won my seat in 2021. During the 2 years that I was a private citizen, I divested my company. Rather, I went back to my company. I was by myself in my office. I worked with people on projects. For example, working for the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, I worked in Bolivia to help that country rebuild its democratic institutions. I also worked with an organization in Thailand that wanted to help LGBTQ people. I also founded the Global Equity Caucus, and I am a gay man. I'm a gay parliamentarian, and when I went to international events, I was looking for people like me so that I could have discussions on how to move issues forward for our community. So, me and a couple other people created this network. And when I won my seat, I had agreements, I had clients, and I spoke with the ethics commissioner, and I was told that there needed to be a third party to manage my affairs. I named such a third party. I was always honest. I said that she was registered as a lobbyist. I'd known her for 10 years. I trusted Ms. Poon, and that is why I named her as director. And so she sends the documents to the Revenue Agency every year. The ethics commissioner told me, great, no reason to look into it, and we're here today because Conservatives want to fight, they want more seats, and I'm going to campaign again. I'm going to win because I serve my constituents with integrity. Thank you very much. This touches on my second question on why we're here today, but I would like to add, and I was listening to my colleagues' questions, very intense questions. Why are you here this morning, and why is there so much hatred? I believe that today's Conservative Party is afraid they're not in control of the changes in the world and here, and they are angry. And that brings a certain hatred within the party. And they want to undermine institutions and damage our country. The Conservative leader said that the notwithstanding clause could apply to rights. Is it my rights? Your rights as a Francophone? The rights of trans people, Indigenous people? how will that notwithstanding clause be used? I can't believe that today's Conservative Party is so angered by things that they can't control, like climate change. They deny climate change, and instead of finding a solution to something that we can clearly see with forest fires, they simply want to say no. They want to go back to a country that no longer exists. And I think that they will do everything that they can to win seats, and I will stop them from doing that at Edmonton Centre. Thank you, Mr. Minister. And 2 questions. What can I say to the people of Trois-Rivières in one sentence? We heard from Mr. Boissonneau, and here's what he had to say. So that's my first question. Actually, I'll let you respond. He followed all the rules. Okay, that's simple. In your view, is there any improvements that can be made with the Ethics Commissioner to avoid such a situation? Mr. Villemur, I believe you have a PhD in ethics. You suggest a great many studies here at this committee, and I think that any system can be improved. But I can say that we need to communicate to Quebecers and Canadians how the system works and how there is oversight of our files by the Ethics Commissioner. I think Canadians would feel good knowing that our system is robust. And you believe that the system works well. Well, I worked within the system that we have, and if the committee wants to suggest changes to the system, they can. But I can say that I've always followed the rules. I work closely with the Ethics Commissioner and his team, and that is why I've been able to respond to your question that was very clear. Minister Boissonneau followed all the rules. Yes, I followed the rules to the letter. It's important, if we want to bring people towards democracy, they need to know that we have systems in place to separate public and private responsibilities. And it's important for me to follow the rules. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Boissonneau. Thank you, Mr. Villemur. Next question to Mr. Green for 6 minutes. You have the floor.
Minister Boissonneau, in your time between your last elected position and your most recent election, I'm to understand it was how long?
I was elected in 2015, and I lost the 2019 election, and I won the 2021 election.
So in 2 years, you created a company that was essentially a consultancy. Is that correct?
No, I had a consultancy from about 1999 until the time that I was first elected in 2015, when I made sure that the company...
In your 2 years, what was the nature of the business that you created here?
So I didn't create a new business, Mr. Green. I simply restarted my business, Zenix, which is a management consultancy. And as I indicated to Mr. Villemur, I had many clients. And my forte, if you can use that... What experience did you have in procurement and PPF? So with respect to that company, which I have no more work to do with, we were at the time of a pandemic. And we were at the time of a great
What experience did you have prior to this procurement that involved PPF and procurement?
15 years in business, Mr. Green. I was able to make sure that we had products supplied to my community. I had 15 years in business. This was a decision to start a business. There were tens of thousands of businesses started up during the pandemic to help our country and our community, and this business was one of them.
Okay, so you got into procurement to take advantage of the opportunities that were presented in COVID, perhaps your relationships with the Liberal government.
I wouldn't say that.
And you had...
Order, Chair.
Mr. Boissonneau, Mr. Green was in the middle of his intervention asking a question. I'm going to ask that you let him finish, and you'll be given an equal amount of time to respond. Mr. Green, go ahead. I did stop your clock.
In your earlier testimony, you stated that the Gowie Group had no contact and that the article states in reference to the text that they mentioned to Randy. It is stated in this article that you've referenced to refute to the Conservatives' claims that it was Gouli's understanding that Anderson was referring to Boissonneau, whom Anderson had told her was a partner at GHI and a public official, a representative of Gowie Group wrote in a statement. So there's an obvious contradiction here that is public. And while it is true, you may want to appear before this committee and act as though this is simply a conservative witch hunt. I would tell you from my perspective as a New Democrat, this doesn't pass the sniff test. So please explain this very obvious contradiction between your testimony and what is being stated here.
Mr. Chair, thanks, Mr. Green. And Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Green, there are some baseless comments in your intervention. And let me just be really clear. I had nothing to do with the Gaia Group. I have no ongoing role in this company and haven't since I was elected. The article itself, and I'll repeat, says we have had no direct communication with Mr. Boissonneau at any point in our dealings with Stephen and the companies. That's from the Gaia Group. Mr. Anderson confirmed in the article that I am not the Randy in question. And so I would also say that, you know, you put words in my mouth and said take advantage. I never said that, and nor did I say the W word, because I'm very careful to use that word. I am here to answer questions as the Ethics Committee has asked me to do. And
sir, listen.
Sure.
That's all great, but you're providing contradictory testimony. The nature of your dealings with a business model that you have no previous experience with, given the case of the size and the scope of the procurement, raises questions to the average Canadian. It raises questions to an objective person looking at this deal when in your own testimony you're stating you're not even aware of who the ownership is. So who is the other Randy?
So, Mr. Green, I stated this earlier to Mr. Barrett. I do not know the name of this person. I have no operational role in that company. I do not have any line of sight to who operates the company, and I would not be able to because of the very strict rules in ethics. And I will state very clearly that I had 15 years of business experience with clients, and
I was able to translate
you
decided
that
to list Kristen Poon's company as 2050 877 Alberta Limited on your disclosure forms and not include the trade name of the Navis Group. That, to me, sir, no matter how much you want to obfuscate, looks like a mission that is intentional. So would you agree that receiving direct payments from a registered lobbyist would appear to show a conflict of interest?
No, Mr. Green, two things there. When I was a private citizen, I worked with a company, that numbered company, that after I became elected, changed its trade name to the Navis Group. And moreover, I was required to use the legal name of the company in my ethics disclosure forms, and that was a directive by the commissioner's team. And when I first did my disclosure with the ethics commissioner, as I explained to Ms. Damoff, the company that I was aware of was still the numbered company, and I wasn't aware of the name change.
I've operated a business myself, sir, and in these types of disclosures, you would put an operating as. You would put an operating as to give disclosure about the nature of the company so it could be cross-referenced against procurement. So why then have a deferred payment arrangement made? And how long will you be receiving payments from the Navis Group?
Mr. Green, just to be clear, it was very stated in a response to Global News by the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner that they required me to use the numbered company, not the operating name. And when I worked with that numbered company, it did not have an operating as. It was simply a numbered company.
But I filled out those sheets too. You could put in the section operating as. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to be forthcoming or not.
I think I've answered this question, and it was a requirement.
Very quick response.
It was a requirement to use the numbered company, and I have provided all information regarding my financial affairs and my business affairs to the Ethics Commissioner,
Thank you.
Who has said there's no need to look into my affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Green. That completes round one. We're going to go to the 5-minute rounds and then 2.5. Just a reminder, equal time of question for equal time of answer. I don't want anybody interrupting each other. Wait till the question is asked, wait till the answer is given, and if I have to intervene, I will, in order to move along. Mr. Cooper, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister Boissonneau, you held the title of partner at GHI before you were elected, correct?
I recall, I actually can't remember that, but partner was the title that I used while I was operating the company.
Thank you.
Mr. Cooper.
Thank you for confirming that. And just GHI is not exactly a big operation. There was you, there was Anderson, and there were a few employees, correct?
Correct.
And so I pose to you, through you, Mr. Chair, then who is the other Randy?
I do not know who the other Randy was. They were somebody hired
Thank
after
you. You
I
say
was.
you
but
claimed-
I do not know
No,
who that person
it
is,
was
Mr.
4
Chair.
seconds, 4 seconds. Mr. Cooper, go ahead.
You have a 50% stake in the company. There's only a handful of people there, and you presently have a 50% stake in GHI, and you mean to tell me that you have no idea out of a handful of people, if not you, who the other Randy is? Are you serious?
20 seconds. Go ahead, Minister.
I have had no operational involvement in this company since I was elected. The company has hired and probably let go people since I was there. I am not allowed to know about the operation of this company, Mr. Cooper, because it is not permitted by the Ethics Commissioner,
Minister,
and so I followed all the rules.
Thank you for that. Minister, that is nonsense, and you know it. But I'm going to go
It's not
to the
nonsense,
text.
Mr. Chair.
Mr.
That is not a fair statement. It's not nonsense. It is the
Let him
truth.
finish, please.
Sure.
Mr. Boissonnault. Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Minister, your answer simply doesn't add up. But there's more to it than that, because if it's some other Randy, then why did the Gowie Group believe that the Randy referenced in the text messages was you? Why?
15 seconds, Minister.
Mr. Chair, it would be inappropriate for me to have anything to do with operational matters. I stepped away from the company in the fall of 2022. Of course, I don't know who the employees are. And in the article
Why is
today,
why
it
is
says that I am
Minister,
not
doesn't add up.
that Randy.
Doesn't
He's got 3 seconds. Go ahead, Minister.
I am not the Randy in this article, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
doesn't add up, Minister. And if it's not you, how is it that Global News couldn't verify who the Randy was? Anderson said there was some other Randy in charge of logistics, but when Global News looked into it, they found that the guy who held himself out as responsible for logistics is one Edward Anderson, not a Randy.
Mr. Cooper, I have no operational relationship to that company, and so the matters of staff are not in my purview. And let me state again for the record, from this morning's article, from the Gowie Group, we have had no direct communication with Mr. Boissonnault at any point in our dealings with Stephen and the companies, and Mr. Anderson has said that Randy is not me, and I have not received any communication
Minister,
from
Mr. Cooper, go ahead.
this group.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Minister, in looking at the text message from Randy to Anderson, it states it's 15:14 Eastern Standard Time. This is a text to someone who is in Alberta in a text message about a client in California. What is 15:14 Eastern Time? Well, it happens to be the time zone of Ottawa. Just another coincidence, Randy?
I mean, I have no idea because I did not receive those texts, and I have no operational relationship to this company.
Be available
it's
for-
a time zone.
Mr. Cooper, just let
in
him
a text.
respond, please.
It's a time zone in a text that I have nothing to do with.
Well,
Mr. Anderson has said that's not
it's another-
me.
it's another
Mr. Gowie,
piece.
Mr.
It's
Chair,
another
Mr.
piece.
Cooper,
Mr. Chair,
Mr.
I am
Cooper.
not being
Doesn't add up.
interrupted.
Mr. Cooper, he's got like 8 seconds. Let him respond, please. Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you,
Boissonnault, and
Mr.
then you can
Chair.
ask your next
I am
question.
not the Randy in question. Mr. Anderson has indicated that I'm not the Randy in question, and the Gowie Group has said they've had no communication
Mr. Cooper,
with me.
go ahead.
And so not only, Eastern Time, Ottawa, also be available in 15 for a partner call. You said you had previously been a partner. Just another coincidence? Just another Randy?
The operational word in your statement, Mr. Cooper, is previously. I ceased to be an officer and a director of GHI in October of 2021, full stop.
Go ahead, you got 25 seconds.
Minister, the Gowie Group thinks it's you. Global News can't track down who the other Randy is. The Randy who's texting happens to be referencing Eastern Time. You happen to be a member of Parliament serving a lot of your time in Ottawa. You said you were a partner. The text message references a partner. This is a small operation. You have a 50% stake, and the fact that you can't identify who the other Randy is doesn't pass the smell test. And if there isn't another
Thank you,
Randy,
Mr.
then
Cooper.
you, sir, broke the law.
Mr.
Thank you.
Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
May I
That's the-
respond, Mr. Chair?
It's the end of the time. You can respond in the next round. Mr.
Sure.
Fisher, go ahead, 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Can I start with a point of order? Like, you're out of order, Mr. Cooper.
No,
You can't
Mr.
make
Fish, that's not a-
comments like that.
That's
No,
not a
I-
point of
I just-
order.
Okay.
That's not a point
Respond
of
to the
order.
point of
Mr.
order.
Fisher,
Fine.
you have 5 minutes. Go ahead. Start your intervention, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. All MPs, backbench MPs, opposition MPs, parliamentary secretaries, and ministers all have forms that they would need to fill out for the Ethics Commissioner. Can you talk about what is required of a minister? You've been a PS as well. Talk about the strict requirements of a minister. You talked about in your opening statements of taking the necessary steps under the Conflict of Interest Act. You talked about some of those steps. I tried really, really hard to pay attention and follow, but there were so many interruptions. I'm going to ask you if you could just outline, and I've never been a minister, probably never will be a minister, but I'd like to know maybe a little bit about what some of those, that higher level of scrutiny is that you have to put yourself forward that perhaps myself and other members of this committee haven't.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Fisher. And look, the scrutiny is intense. You've got 120 days to comply off the start. And if a minister has stocks, you have to sell them. If your partner has stocks, your life partner has stocks, you have to sell them. You can only hold mutual funds, and you have to make sure that there's no operational connection between you and any businesses or nonprofit associations that you would have operated at some point. And so in my case, it was not just make sure that everything was compliant with the Act in the first 120 days. When you're a minister, it's a constant, compliance isn't an endpoint. It's a process. It's fluid. And what's important to note is that I have made the decision, rightly, to recuse myself on appointments and nominations. I've always been very careful to make sure that I respect the rules that are set out by the Commissioner of Ethics, and the Commissioner of Ethics himself has said that I follow the rules and there's no need to look into my business affairs.
Thank you, Minister. And I appreciate the clarity that you've provided through that statement. You've probably heard of the news about Conservative MP Brendan Leslie crafting and circulating a fake news video online. I can see why, and you're an interruption today into our misinformation, disinformation, malinformation study, which I had found as a new member of this committee to be absolutely super interesting. Notwithstanding the fact that...
Mr. Fisher, I've stopped your clock there.
Thank you.
I'm just going to remind you that it was a majority of the committee that voted to have Mr. Boissonneau here as part of this study. So it's not an interruption of anything. This was a decision of the committee, and he is here, as will the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner be here, because a motion was passed by this committee. I just want to clarify that for you, okay? Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Chair. Mr. Boissonneau, in my remaining time, is there anything else that you would like to put forward on the record?
I think I'll restate that I'm not a lobbyist. I've never been a lobbyist. Never registered as a lobbyist because I never wanted to be a lobbyist. And, to your other question, Mr. Fisher, I hope that the committee will be able to get back to the business at hand. And I'm happy to appear here so that people understand that the Commissioner of Ethics looked into, asked me for information. I provided that information, and the Ethics Commissioner said there's no need to look into my business affairs.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, I would suggest that calling relevance on me, and in this particular instance, when there has been very little call of relevance to many, many members of this committee recently, I would take some umbrage with that.
And you can. And I was clearly explaining and reminding you that it wasn't a matter of relevance. It was a matter of the fact that a motion had been passed by this committee. You still have a minute and 38 seconds. Okay. Monsieur Fortin pour 2 minutes et 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
2.5 minutes. You have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, Mr. Boissonneau. I've been listening to the different questions. The Ethics Commissioner told you that there were no issues, that there was no need to investigate. Have you had any discussions with the Lobbying Commissioner? For the first question, yes, it has been confirmed by the Ethics Commissioner that he doesn't have to look at my private affairs. Regarding the Lobbying Commissioner, I have received nothing from the Commissioner. No communication from the Lobbying Commissioner. I follow the rules. I'm an elected official, and I had a role as parliamentary secretary. I'm in that 5-year period. I've never been a lobbyist. I've never been registered as a lobbyist. And so I've not received anything from the lobbying commissioner. I understand. And I understand that you never wanted to be a lobbyist. But that doesn't mean that you might not have violated lobbying rules. But have you made a request to the lobbying commissioner? Have you asked about your situation, whether or not it would be problematic? Have you tried to examine this further with the lobbying commissioner? Answer: I've always followed the rules since I became parliamentary secretary, and there was no need to confirm that I followed the rules because I follow the rules. I believe that Ms. Poon is a registered lobbyist, correct? Yes. Has she spoken to you on the matter of your activities and whether or not they follow the lobbying legislation? I was always clear with her and with clients that I would never organize a meeting with a government official, and I would never participate in an event with an official, and I have never done so. Your company was in discussions with the Edmonton airport, and during those activities, did you participate? No, I never participated in meetings with the federal government and Edmonton airport. I never organized meetings for the airport with the federal government because that would have gone against my responsibilities. Thank you, Mr. Boissonneau.
Go ahead.
Minister, when was the last time you had a conversation with Kristen Poon?
Earlier this week. We are friends, and we've known each other for 15 years.
So you chat. How frequently would you suggest that you are in communication with Ms. Poon?
Depending on the time of the year or what's going on in our friend circle, we would communicate a couple of times a month, perhaps, if not more.
And Ms. Poon is a registered lobbyist?
She is no longer a registered lobbyist. My understanding is that her registry, she ceased to be a lobbyist in June of 2022.
And you received payments from her prior to that?
That is not true. What happened is that work that I did while I was a private citizen, we made sure that all of the dealings that I had as a private citizen
when was the
were
last
provided
payment
to
you received
the
from Ms.
Commissioner of
Poon?
Ethics.
When was the last payment you received
Mr. Green,
from Ms.
you
Poon?
know that there's a process for that, and that information is with the Commissioner of Ethics, and the Commissioner of Ethics...
So you're refusing to answer a basic question, Randy, that would help provide some light to this topic? When was the last time you received money from her?
There were no monies were received by any company that I'm responsible for from Ms. Poon in 2024.
That wasn't the question I asked. When was the last time you received money? 2023?
Mr.
2022?
Green,
When was
that
it?
matter is with the Conflict of Interest Commission. I provided everything to them, and the Ethics Commissioner has said there's no need to look into my affairs.
Well, that's great. We'll talk to him next and certainly look at the loopholes that are in that. Why did you decide to have a deferred payment arrangement?
Mr. Green, that is a relationship that was done while I was a private citizen, and I shared all that information with the Ethics Commissioner. The Ethics Commissioner has
Did you not
made it very
receive money
clear
while you were a private
that
citizen?
There's no need to look into my business affairs.
Did you not receive payment while you were a private citizen?
I received income as a private citizen while I was making a living as a business person, yes.
So at some point you decided with a deferral agreement. When did you make that decision?
Mr. Green, that information has been provided to the Ethics Commissioner. The Ethics Commissioner has looked at my business affairs and said there's no need to look into them.
Has the CRA?
Hold on, Mr. Green, I've stopped the clock. I have a point of order from Mr. Barrett.
Does the procedure committee not require that a witness answer a question? Not knowing the answer to a question, providing an answer that isn't satisfactory to the member asking, are not open to debate. However, refusing to answer a question of a parliamentarian at committee is and has been found to be a contempt of the parliamentarian's right who has put the question. So, Chair, a refusal to answer a question, it is a fact that is not permissible. I put to you, Chair, that the minister is refusing
Mr.
to
Chair,
answer
I
the
am not
member's
refusing
question,
to answer any question here today.
and that's
Thank you,
not
Mr.
acceptable. That's not
Mr.
acceptable.
Bear, we dealt with this with Mr. Warnick, and I certainly, when he was here, I clearly stated that the expectation of the committee is that the witnesses will provide an answer to the question. I'm going to leave it to Mr. Green here in the very short period that he has left to conclude this round, and then we're going to go to quick second rounds or other rounds here. But the expectation is that the ministers will answer, and then it'll be up to the committee to decide. If they're not satisfied with those answers, then they can take action.
On the
Mr.
same
Barrett.
point of order?
Go ahead, Mr. McCann. Sorry, Mr. Green.
Thank
we
you,
got
Mr. Chair.
point.
I would like to comment that the minister has not refused to answer any questions. He's given answers.
That's debate. That's debate,
I'm
Mr.
responding
McCann.
to the point of order.
Yeah,
the allegation is false. He's given answers. They just don't like the answers.
Thank you.
On the point of order, sir?
Okay, Mr. Green, on the point of order, go ahead.
Given that I'm the part of the topic of the point of order, I reserve the right to also submit to you, sir, that he has refused to provide answers to this committee. He's done it on multiple occasions in 2 minutes and 23 seconds. And I would like to say that is what I would consider to be a breach of the powers of this committee. And I would suggest to you that nobody, whether they be a parliamentary secretary or a cabinet minister, is above the procedures of a standing committee. That is why he's here before us, Mr. Chair. So I would ask through you on this point of order that the member provide in writing, and he can refer to the Hansard for the subject of the questions that I've asked him, a response, sir, failing to do which puts him in breach, in my opinion, to the standing orders and powers of this committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. And on that, I am going to ask the clerk, on behalf of yourself, sir, to review the Hansard and to submit the questions that have been asked of Mr. Boissonneau and have him respond to the committee. Madam Clerk, just make a note of the time on that. And I will ask.
How much time do I have left in my round?
You have 15 seconds by my clock, but
okay, I'm going to ask
that you continue, sir. Go ahead.
With my 15 seconds left, I would say that in the opening remarks, the minister suggested that somehow this was a conservative witch hunt. I would share with you that as a New Democrat and somebody responsible for, as a person on this committee, on the Ethics Committee, and a proud New Democrat, I'd share that's not the case. And I just say, Randy, your testimony today has not helped you out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. We're going to go to Mr. Brock. I am going to limit it to 3-minute interventions at this point. I apologize to the committee for that, followed by Mr. Housefather, and that'll conclude the time that we have. That'll take us to 12:06, which is roughly the time where we started, not taking into account many of the interruptions that we've had. Mr. Brock, I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. With respect, Minister, I share MP Green's latter comments that your testimony has not been helpful. In fact, not only have you been disrespectful, you are exhibiting traits in my old career that I would classify as a lying witness. You've been evasive.
That's not appropriate, Mr. Chair.
Well, it is.
That's not parliamentary language.
I would suggest, Mr. Brock, that you not use that language.
You've got the inability to tell the straight facts and to tell the straight goods, Minister. There lacks the ring of truth in what you have to say.
Go ahead on your point of order, Mr. McCann.
Mr. Brock's language is definitely unparliamentary. He needs to withdraw it, and he needs to apologize.
I'm not withdrawing, Chair.
No, he used a different context. I'm going to allow him to do it. I'm going to ask him to continue. You've got a couple minutes, Mr. Brock. Go ahead.
Sorry, on the same point of order.
Go ahead, Ms. Damoff, on the same point of order.
I've heard in the House many times the Speaker say that you can't say indirectly what you, that you can't say directly, and that is exactly what Mr. Brock has done, and we cannot call each other liars or providing untruths to Parliament.
I appreciate that. I think Mr. Brock understands your point of order. I'm going to ask him to continue for the next couple of minutes. Go ahead.
And Canadians are watching. They take particular attention every time a minister appears at committee. And what you've done, sir, is just displayed a complete lack of respect for policies and procedures at this committee, leaving aside the evasiveness of your responses and clearly the lack of ring of truth, as I've indicated. So on the issue of what was reported this morning in the global news, did you take it upon yourself to reach out to your former partner and ask for clarification as to who this other Randy was?
So, Mr. Brock, on that particular point,
yes
I have
or
no
no, sir? Did you reach?
Role.
I've got 3 minutes.
I have seconds to
Sir,
respond to
I have
your.
got, I've
Mr.
got
Chair,
3
I give
minutes.
you
Point of order.
time to respond.
Mr. Brock, just allow the minister to respond to the question. I know that we're on short timelines here, but please allow Mr. Boissonnault to respond to that. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I have no operational role in that company. I am not the Randy in the article today. And let me give you an example, Mr. Chair. I don't know why Mr. Brock received income from the province of Ontario while he's been serving as an MP, but I assume that he cleared that with the Ethics Commissioner in the same way that I cleared my business dealings with the Ethics Commissioner, and no investigation or evaluation of my business affairs will take
Mr. Brock,
place.
go ahead.
Just a point of order, Mr. Chair. The question that Mr. Brock asked was well over a minute, and the response was 25
there
or 30
was
I
a
think he
preamble,
concluded.
there was a question, yes or no.
I think he
So I'll ask
concluded.
again, Minister.
Go ahead, Mr. Brock,
You're
please.
laughing at the whole process, but Canadians are not laughing at you, and they're not siding with you. Did you reach out to Mr. Anderson this morning after you read the Global News report, yes or no?
I am not the Randy in that report.
Did you
The
call
articles
Mr. Anderson?
No, why would I call Mr. Anderson? I
Point
did
of
not
order,
know.
Chair. Point of
the
order,
answer-
Chair.
Clearly,
the
Mr. Anderson didn't want to
Mr.
provide the
Brock,
surname
Mr.
to
Brock,
Randy.
Under
Mr.
the
Brock,
ethics,
the
Mr.
answer,
Chair.
he
I
said
gave the
no.
answer.
He said no.
Chair,
Are you on a point of order?
Yes,
Mr.
I
Young?
am,
Go
Chair.
ahead.
Out of respect for our interpreters, and this keeps happening, people are interrupting.
I agree.
And it's so unfair to the
Okay.
people that work so hard for us.
Thank
so
you.
if we could please
Yeah.
just knock it
And
off.
I've made that very clear. Go ahead, Mr.
So,
Brock.
Randy,
You've got like literally 20 seconds, sir.
Minister, will you provide to this committee details of your text messages for all the phones that were in operation on September the 22nd, 2022, so that this committee can determine if you are in fact the Randy that the text messages are referring to, the Randy that the other partner wants to communicate with? Will you reach out to your service provider and provide us with details
Okay.
of your text messages on that day for all your devices?
Minister,
yes or no?
quick response, Minister, please.
Mr. Chair, I have no operational role in this company. I do not know who this Randy is. It is not me, and it's clear in the article that it's not me.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to take that as a request from Mr. Brock, and again, I'm going to ask the clerk to follow up on that request. Mr. Housefather, you have 4 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Point of order?
Go ahead on your point of order, Mr. McKinnon.
I'd just like to observe that a request from a member is not the same as a request from the committee.
Well, we can follow up and ask, and if Mr. Boissonnault decides to submit the request from Mr. Brock, then he's capable of doing that. If he doesn't, then it's up to the committee to determine which direction they're going to go on this, and that could include up to moving a motion on the matter. So we can make the request. It's up to Mr. Boissonnault to either submit to the request or not. Mr. Housefather, you have 4 minutes. Go ahead, sir. Sorry, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister Boissonnault, do you know what the 28th most popular boy's name in 1956 was?
I do not.
Randy. Huh. You know how many Randys were born that year?
I do not.
28,000.
It's a lot of Randys.
A lot of Randys. Can I ask a question in terms of your business? You've been a businessman for the time that you're not in politics. When you earn income, does it always come all at once? For example, let's say you set up a client and you enter into a contract with the client, and they buy goods, and they committed to buy goods over a period of 2 years. Would it not be normal then that a salesperson or anybody who negotiated that agreement would be paid over that extended period, whether or not they remained with the company, given that they were part of that initial agreement?
That would be reasonable.
And so all of these bombshells that we've heard today, that there was a text message from somebody named Randy in Canada shocking. The idea that somebody could be paid deferred income because they were part of a company and negotiated a deal and left the company seemed like shocking to me. Are they as shocking to you as they are to me?
After 20-some years in business, it's not shocking, and it is a customary practice. And the reason that it's important that we have a really strong ethics regime is so that a third-party neutral arbiter can look into those matters and make sure that they comply with the Act, which is exactly what I did, which is why the Ethics Commissioner said, no need to look into my affairs.
Understandable. Can I ask you briefly, the question came up here, and I totally understand we're in Pride Month. How did it make you feel when a member of Parliament earlier this week said that he would vote against gay marriage?
Well, thankfully, we're in a different time, in a different place, where gay marriage is real, and I can tell you when that happened, it was one of the happiest days of my life. And I ran in part because I could see the country changing. But I come from a province that still struggles with recognizing to us LGBTQI people, and we have a long way to go. And this Conservative Party is not clear on the record as to how it would support trans people, gender non-binary people, LGBTQI people, and I have grave concern that a future Conservative government under Pierre Poilievre would suspend my rights using the notwithstanding clause in the Charter.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I yield my time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Housefather. That concludes our first panel for today. Minister, I want to thank you for taking the time to appear before committee. I'm going to suspend while we switch over and have the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner appear before us. Meeting suspended. Thank you. for today. Our next panel is from the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. I would like to welcome the Commissioner, Conrad von Fichtenstein, and then the Director of Advisory and Compliance, Lynn Robinson-Dalpé. Commissioner, the floor is yours for up to 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Je vous remercie de m'avoir invité. Je suis accompagné.
I would like to thank you for inviting me. With me today is Lynn Robinson-Dalpé, Director of Advisory and Compliance. As we join you today, I recognize the weight of responsibility entrusted upon our office and the work of this committee. Our democracy relies fundamentally on the integrity and transparency of its elected and appointed officials and our ability to safeguard public trust.
It's within these principles and minds that I see the twofold purpose of the regimes we administer. One is to help public officials avoid and manage their conflicts of interest. And the second is to facilitate the movement of qualified people in and out of the public service. Qualified, competent, experienced people who are called to public service may well face conflicts of interest. That's not unusual. The issue is how to avoid and manage those conflicts and to protect the integrity of officials and the institutions they serve. Le ministre Boissonnault est un exemple de quelqu'un.
Minister Boissonnault is an example of someone who has moved in and out of public service and back again. Upon his first election as a Member of Parliament in 2015, he complied with the Conflict of Interest Code for members of the House of Commons. He also complied with the Conflict of Interest Act when later appointed as Parliamentary Secretary.
2019 and 2021, when he was not elected or appointed official, he resumed work with Genex Catalyst Inc., which I shall call Genex hereafter, a company incorporated in 2000 in which he owns 100% of the shares. It is a management consulting company which gained a contract to lobby on behalf of the Edmonton Regional Airports Authority. The minister resigned as director of Xenex when he was re-elected and again became subject to the code as a member and subject to the act as a minister. Kirsten Poon became director of Xenex and continued to lobby in Xenex's name on behalf of the Edmonton Regional Authority until June 21. After that day, the lobbying was done in her own company's name, 2050877 Alberta Limited, operating under the name of Neves. Minister Boissonnault received no remuneration from Xenex after being elected and appointed minister. However, he disclosed to us that he was owed an outstanding business income from Neves. That amount was paid to Neves, paid by Neves subsequently to Xenex. Minister Boissonnault has 100% interest in 2256956 Alberta Limited. It in turn owns 50% of an affiliated company called Global Health Imports. His ownership of Xenex, his ownerships of 2256956 Alberta Limited, and his indirect partial ownership of Global Health Imports were all disclosed to my office. There is no disclosed evidence that the ownership of this company creates any conflict of interest. He complied with the rules under the Act and the Code. Compte tenu des informations que les ministres a
Considering the information that Minister Boissonnault has disclosed to the office, it appears he has complied with the requirements of the Code and the Act related to matters involving his companies, and consequently, there is no need to commence an examination. We are in the process of the usual annual review process with the Minister, and will be looking at all his updated disclosures with the office.
Mr. Robinson-Dalpé and I are here to answer any question you may have regarding the compliance process of the work and how we handle the file of Mr. Boissonnault. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. We're going to start with our first round. And just for the benefit of committee, I did say I was going to leave a little bit of time at the end to discuss the question that was brought up at the beginning of the meeting by Mr. Baines. I am going to do that. Give us enough time to discuss it. Mr. Barrett, 6 minutes. Go ahead.
This morning, there were revelations in global news that Minister Randy Boissonnault may have been party to what's been described by some as wire fraud to the tune of $500,000 as it relates to his business partner, Mr. Stephen Anderson. So there were text messages that were included in the media reports that detail someone named Randy, who's not pleased with the delay of this $500,000 wire transfer with a company out of California. And then Randy, in the text messages, demands a partner call with Stephen Anderson. So Minister Randy Boissonnault has said today that he owns a company that owns, that he wholly owns a company that owns 50% of GHI, and Mr. Anderson, to his knowledge, owns the other half. Minister Boissonnault contends that he is not the Randy involved in these text messages. Having made a pronouncement following a complaint that you weren't going to pursue an investigation, does the emergence of new information generally, and does the information in this article today, if you've read it, give rise to a re-examination of your decision? And finally, have you reviewed the allegations that were reported in the media this morning?
Mr. Barrett, like you, I read the story this morning for the very first time. It's complete news to me, never knew anything about it. It obviously raises some serious implications if the story is true. You heard what the minister said. The ruling that we made was based on the information that he disclosed to us, and he disclosed to us with regard to GHI only one thing, that he owned 50% through his numbered company. Clearly, we will look into this, and if our looking into it shows that there's more to it, there is substance to it, there may be contraventions of either the Act or probably the Act, then of course we will have to look, and I have the capacity to self-initiate another inquiry and look into it. At this point in time, I am really caught by surprise. I didn't know about it until I read it this morning. I don't know this thing. I heard the minister's testimony. I think it would be absolutely irresponsible to make a premature decision as to what we're going to do and how. All I can do is tell you that we will look into it.
Right. I think that's entirely fair, sir. It was new information. Just like you, we prepare for committee based on the information that we have, and in the 2 hours in advance to find that information or those allegations. It is it creates a challenging environment. So you expressed that it was that the allegations in it were serious and new. So is it correct to understand that that Minister Boissonnault didn't previously disclose that circumstance to you, and that you will be investigating these new allegations, and if necessary, you would self-initiate an investigation?
As I said in my opening statement, we made our ruling on the basis of the information disclosed to us. He disclosed to us that he owned 50% indirect of GHI through his numbered company. That's all we know about GHI. All of this now is what GSI did, was involved, who ran actually it, who this Randy is that is being mentioned, did he actually do, etc. All of this is news, and as I said, all I can do is say we will look into it. I cannot make a decision on any of that because I really have nothing more than the report in which you have too from Global News and the testimony that you heard this morning from the minister.
Yep, that's. I appreciate that response. I want to ask a quick question on another subject, if I may. The Auditor General released a report this morning, and I'm not sure if your office gets those as well. And in it, there were 90 instances of undisclosed, and I think 96 instances of disclosed conflicts of interest. But the 90 instances of undisclosed conflicts of interest in matters of $76 million being handed out by by individuals who were appointed by the NDP Liberal government. Are you aware of this finding by the Auditor General?
No, of course not. She makes her finding public today. We don't. She is under confidentiality provisions and obligations the same as I. Having read that, etc. As you know, I undertook to give a ruling on the conflict of interest of Madame Verschuren and Mr. Winmet before August 1st, and I will do so. And clearly we will deal with conflict of interest there. I don't know what these conflict of interests are that she refers to. I haven't read the report either. Just like you this morning, it came out, and I managed to read the executive summary. So I really don't want to speak any further about it, because maybe there's something in the report that will illuminate some of these points. It's very troubling to hear that there has been that much conflict of interest, and obviously that's an area that concerns us primarily. And while she is more or less, as an Auditor General, she's looking at the whole operations,
Thank you, Commissioner.
the effect, the value for money, etc. So there's a different focus that she has than we have.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Commissioner. Mr. Housefather, I have you for 6 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, thank you for being here as always. Do you remember anything momentous that happened on September the 8th, 2022, Commissioner?
No. I'm sorry.
Well, no, it was striking to me because I was reading this text that was ostensibly sent on September the 8th, 2022 from somebody named Randy. It's 1314 MST and 1514 EST. We all know the rest of the text. And something struck me that date was very familiar. And I looked back and I remembered that was the date that Queen Elizabeth II died. And then I remembered that was the date that there was a cabinet retreat in Vancouver, because all of the members of cabinet were wondering what they could wear, whether they had black or not in their wardrobes. And so one of the things that everybody's pointing out and was earlier pointing out in this text, that they were talking about Eastern Standard Time, but Mr. Boissonnault on September the 8th, 2022 was actually at a cabinet retreat in Vancouver on Pacific Standard Time, and busy in a cabinet retreat, which would lead me to believe that the idea that he was leaving a cabinet retreat to deal with an issue like this strikes me as even more fanciful. Commissioner, you would acknowledge, I'm sure, that this is something that, as you said, you're going to look into, but the fact that there's a text from somebody ostensibly named Randy doesn't immediately lead you to a conclusion that this Randy is Minister Boissonnault, does it?
I deal with facts, not with allegations or assumptions or conjectures, etc. And I don't know who the author of this article is, what knowledge she has of the fact, etc. When we look into it, we will state the facts as we find them.
Thank you. I think that's exactly the right way to do it, rather than conducting meetings that make allegations with no basic knowledge of actually what happened. So thank you, Commissioner. Can I also ask, you apply the ethics guidelines. I know as a parliamentary secretary, I fill out forms. I work with your office. So does ministers. And you will ask questions when you believe something on our forms is not exact or is not detailed enough, and you will form then your own conclusions, correct?
Well, absolutely. As you know, each one of you gets appointed a personal counselor who then looks at your disclosures and asks questions and tries to make sure that it's understandable, everything is there, nothing is left out, nothing is overlooked, and basically guides you to make a complete disclosure. And that it's an ongoing process, and you basically have an ongoing conversation with that person, especially since you also have the obligation to update the information should there be a change. So hopefully through that change, through that relationship between the councillor and the elected or appointed official, we make sure that all relevant facts are presented, and to the extent that the law requires it, will be disclosed and put on the public record.
And agreed. And I find that iterative conversation with the councillor is incredibly helpful in making sure that on both sides there's clarity and you avoid ever having a conflict or being perceived to have a conflict. One of the things that's been raised is the issue of monies being paid from a company to allegedly to the minister after the fact of assuming cabinet. You are, of course, familiar with the concept of closing a deal while you're with a company and thereafter obtaining money that was due under the initial contract into the company, even though you're not working any longer for the company. Is that something that's a process that's understood under the Act and recognized and that could be worked through with the councillor?
If there is a payment that in effect you earned prior to being elected and has not been paid, that becomes an outstanding debt which you're entitled to collect, and it's not in violation of any part of the Act.
And at times, that time is uncertain because it's based on, actual sales being made after the fact.
Yeah, or maybe become some certain event has to happen, or a certain thing has to be achieved before the amount becomes due. But still, if that event happens subsequent to your election, it still becomes, at that point in time, in effect, a debt outstanding which you're entitled to collect.
Right. So there's a lot of things that, you can use words to distort the actual facts of what happened and make look bad when actually they're perfectly normal and covered under the disclosure forms and the Ethics Act. And I think, unfortunately, this is one of those cases where there's an attempt to make something look unkosher when it actually may very well be kosher. And I trust you, Commissioner, will be the right person to look at that. So thank you very much. And if you have anything else to say, otherwise I'll turn the time back.
Okay, Commissioner, we've got 40 seconds. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, all I can say that the documentation that was disclosed to us and shows that there's an outstanding amount owed to Mr. Bazineau for works that he conducted prior to being elected, and that was being paid to his company subsequently to his election.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. And just again, for the benefit of members, the lights were going off. It wasn't a vote, it was a quorum call, so we just checked on that. Monsieur Fortin, vous avez 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for being with us today. I heard your testimony, and I heard Mr. Boissonneau's as well. And you listened to him, and everything seemed to be compliant, but you are surprised, as are we all, after reading this morning's article. It is too soon to comment on such an article. We'll have to verify the facts. I imagine that's what your office will do before you comment. But I have more general questions on the work of your office. The ethics, or rather, we often have strict requirements for the Ethics Commission, especially regarding government members, and I think that we are right in having these strict requirements. A member of the government should go above and beyond for anything regarding ethics, and I believe that your reputation is excellent and that you do great work. That said, I would like to know, do you believe that the tools that you have at your disposal currently allow you to do reliable work, or should there be improvements to the legislation to allow you to do a more in-depth assessment? Answer. The tools that we have for the disclosure of information, I believe these tools are sufficient. We can start an investigation. We can ask someone to testify. We have the power to insist. To require someone to speak under oath. and not only the person, but other people who might be implicated. I believe that we can have access to all the necessary facts. The legislation dates back about 30 years, and there are certain provisions that are hard to implement, but for investigations, the tools are adequate. Okay, so you think it is sufficient, but the reliability that we're requiring, is it enough? Do you feel like you're asked to do too much in your investigations, or do you feel like you would like to go further, dig deeper? Or do you believe that your investigations are reliable enough? Well, we need to start with the goal. What's our goal? As I said, we're not trying to find guilty persons. We want to facilitate interactions between the private and public domain. An elected official or an appointed official has probably made investments, and we want to find solutions so that they declare what needs to be declared, what they can have, what they can't have. Now, if there are suspicions, or if there are allegations, or that something is hidden, well, at that time, I can start an investigation, and I have the tools at my disposal to see what the situation is. And if there's a violation, then I will share this information to the public, to the Prime Minister, the Speaker of the House. Investigations are on cases that are not compliant. We want to help elected officials to avoid conflicts of interest. And the reliability that we're asking of you seems to be enough. Yes. During your mandate, not only in this affair with Randy Boissonneau, but other affairs, do you believe that you are facing any pressure from the government or others that may seek to sway you in one way or another? No. There is no pressure being put on the office. Most respect the neutrality of the office. What we do is confidential and objective. To my knowledge, there has never been a case where someone has tried to influence our objectivity. Thank you, Mr. von Finkelstein. I would like to thank you for answering my questions in French. I greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Le commissaire est...
The commissioner can speak French. We have noticed that experience in the past.
6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, you may have, first of all, I'll just ask, I don't want to leave. Were you able to watch the last round of questioning?
Yes.
With Mr. Boissonneau here?
Yes, I was.
Would you recall my exchange with him about listing of companies, the numbered company versus the operating as?
Yes, you asked him to do that, and I understand he undertook to furnish such a list.
Well, we hope he will. My question through to you is that when disclosures are made, what are the requirements? If a company is a numbered company, is it required to disclose who it's operating as in order to provide public disclosure?
Well, the disclosure is very simple. You can own a company. You can have an interest in it. That's no problem. You can't run a company if you are elected and you're appointed minister. Here,
but the purpose of the disclosures, if I could, sir, is to identify to the public who the beneficial owners are of companies. It is my suggestion that numbered companies that do not actually list who they're operating as obscures the beneficial ownership, would it not?
Why is a numbered company obscuring official ownership any more than a non-numbered company? I'm sorry, I don't get.
Well, because for instance, if there's a numbered company operating as the Nevis Group, and the Nevis Group is the one who is listed as the contractors, but on the disclosures it only shows the numbered company, then an average person would assume objectively that they couldn't make the connection between the numbered company and the operating company, the new named operating company.
The disclosure is not made for the average person, first of all. It's made for the office, right? And only the portions that have to be disclosed and put on the public record, we put on the public record. Obviously, if you have a numbered company which also operates under a name, it would be appropriate to disclose both. You know, if you don't do that, as I mentioned before, each person who's appointed gets a counselor to advise him on, and if the councillor would certainly ask you, you own 3509 Limited. Does this company operate under a trading name or not? And that would be disclosed.
Is that part of the standard questions that advisors would provide to cabinet ministers?
I would hope so. I can't you know, I have 53 people working for me. I don't know whether they all do that, but they should. I mean, clearly.
Could you please report back to this committee, sir, about what questions are required for disclosure for cabinet ministers? Because for me, I'll state to you, it is a material non-disclosure to omit who your operating name is when it comes to procurement. Now, the crux of a conflict of interest, as we've talked many times, sir, you and I, about not just the actual conflict, but the perceived conflict. And when there are instances where there's reporting that demonstrates that there's a minister, a cabinet minister, who is receiving contracts through a numbered company in a deferred payment arrangement, when the actual procurement happens with an operating name other than the numbered company, to me, sir, that would erode and undermine the public trust when it comes to open and transparent procurement practices related to companies connected to ministers.
Well, first of all, Lynn, do you want to answer his questions regarding what questions councillors put regarding numbered companies?
So essentially, when the office is informed of a private company or any other company, the requirement to disclose either the numbered company or the registered company name or the corporation's legal name, its trade name, it doesn't matter right now at this present time whether they report one, both, or not, or just strictly the numbered company. So in those cases, we will go back to the minister or reporting public office holder, asking whether or not there is an operating name, if the company is operating under a legal name or another name. And if we do have that name, then we will make it public. But there is no requirement to disclose either the numbered company or the operating company's name. One or the other is perfectly acceptable under the Act and under the Code as well.
Acceptable under the Act and the Code, but I think it's fair to say in this instance it presents a bit of a problem in terms of what the public confidence is relating to the ability to track, procurement contracts that are material in nature. We're talking, big contracts here. And so I would ask you, is it a recommendation that perhaps this committee recommend that all disclosures of numbered companies include the operating and trade names to provide greater transparency and accountability to the public and your office, quite frankly, because as was identified, you can only investigate what is submitted to you. So if you're submitted a numbered company and you're looking for contradictions or conflicts within the act and you don't know what the operating name is, would that not provide a significant investigative gap between your ability to confirm or perhaps investigate any potential conflicts?
Mr. Green, I set the rules for what the councillors ask, and we can really clearly establish that where the numbered companies involved, there has to be a follow-up question as to whether it has a trade name or not, and if so, that has to be disclosed. I mean, we're not trying to hide anything. I'm not trying to help anybody to hide anything. So that's something that we can easily.
Just to be clear, that's not my assertion. I'm not suggesting you.
No. I understand, but I just wanted you to understand
We're at the end of the time.
We're talking about internal procedures here. It's something very easily can be achieved.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Green. That concludes our first round. We're going to go to 5-minute rounds. I'm going to start with Mr. Kurek. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Commissioner, and thank you for coming back to the committee. One of the challenges I think we have here is that there's questions about who this Randy is. You've mentioned those questions. I know that was certainly the conclusion of the last round. That is still an outstanding question. I would just ask, though, that it seems to me that in this question about who is Randy, if the principals involved in this company and the exchange accordingly, I thought that they were in fact referring to a minister of the Crown, even if that minister wasn't involved in that, and there was benefit derived from that. Is there some ethical challenges that you would have with that?
The task of the office is to ensure there's no conflict of interest and to avoid conflict, help people avoid conflict of interest. In the situation that you mentioned, the question is there a conflict of interest here somewhere? Is that, if there's this exchange using the name of Randy, does that by itself create a conflict of interest? No. If the Randy is a minister and he is actually involved in running a company, then of course it's a totally different issue.
And if he benefited from the perception that he was the one that was passing along that message, would that constitute a conflict?
It's with all of these hypotheticals, it depends very much on the facts, and without having the total facts, I can't answer your question.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that emphasizes the fact that we need all the facts involved here because there are many outstanding questions. Just curious, Commissioner, did you have a chance to refer or your office review the deferred compensation agreement that Minister Boissonnault received as a result of work that he didn't do well as a minister? Did your office have a chance to review that?
I don't think it was a deferred compensation. It was an amount of service that he rendered for which he had not been paid. Did we actually, Lynn, do you know the details of this?
I can only confirm that we saw the information of what is owed from Navis to the numbered company, but we did not review an agreement per se.
Okay, I appreciate that. Well, look, thank you, Commissioner, and I know you're always willing to come before this committee, and I do appreciate that because it's appreciated. And as we get more facts, I know that you and your office will be hard at work looking at that information. But because, Mr. Chair, it's clear that there is some outstanding information that is required in order for us to be able to effectively evaluate this, whether it's the question about who is this Randy or whether it's the whole series of challenges associated with what we've been, this committee has agreed to study here today. I would move a motion, and I hope that there would be support for what even the Liberals have suggested that we need, and that is to find out the facts. So, Mr. Chair, I hope that we can find agreement amongst this committee for the following motion. That in light of today's media reports and Minister Randy Boissonnault's testimony, the committee call on Stephen Anderson, Kristen Poon, and representatives of the Gowrie Group to appear before the committee individually and testify forthwith for no less than 1 hour each on or before June 20th, and the committee seek additional resources to facilitate these meetings if needed. And then, Chair, I would just make a brief comment on the motion.
Just let me just stop you there. Have you circulated that motion to the clerk, Mr. Kirk?
It's on its way.
Okay. So the motion is in order, and I'll give you the floor for some brief comments. I'm going to ask the clerk to circulate that as soon as she gets it. Go ahead, Mr. Kirk.
Thanks very much, Chair, and I hope that there's agreement, because certainly what the Liberals have suggested, while making some pretty outlandish accusations about, and quite frankly, the minister's conduct was, I've never seen a minister be so partisan before a committee than what Minister Boissonnault was this morning. And certainly there's concern about that, but you'll note in this motion, Chair, that it is, we are not calling back the minister. We want to get the facts. We want to ensure that Canadians can find out exactly what happened. So certainly if there is further information that requires the minister to be recalled, I would hope that we could find agreement amongst the committee. That this is simply to further ensure that Canadians are in fact getting the answers that are deserved when it comes to this matter. And I know Mr. Green as well had mentioned that there's some follow-up needed, and I know that that the Commissioner is always very willing to work with this committee. So with that, Chair, I would simply conclude my remarks by hoping that all members of this committee would support the simple request to get to the bottom of the very clear and outstanding questions that come about as a result of the discussion that we've had here today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kirk. The motion has been moved. I do see your hand, Mr. Green, and then I've got Ms. Damoff's hand on the motion. Commissioner, I'm just going to ask that you hang on for a few minutes until we deal with this. Okay. The motion is in English only, so I am going to suspend for a few minutes while we're able to distribute that dans les deux langues officielles, Monsieur Fortin.
In both official languages. We're going to suspend for a few minutes. Just for a few minutes.
Back from suspension, just to advise all members that the motion has been shared dans les deux langues officielles. We have a motion that has been moved. I'm going to advise the committee members as well, because I know the question of resources came up. We have until 1:30. 1:30 is the hard stop, okay? Monsieur Fortin, un appel de règlement?
Oui, en fait, je vous demanderais, Monsieur le Président, de suspendre.
Yes, I would like for us to suspend 5 minutes so that I can talk about the motion with Monsieur Villemur, who's not currently here. I believe that it's an important motion. We just received it. I would like to be able to take the time to examine it. Just 5 minutes, please. I'll give 5 minutes, and we'll come back after that, and I'll give the floor to Mr. Green.
Merci. having given time to look at the motion, when we left, the motion had been moved by Mr. Carrick. Everybody has the motion at this point. We are resuming debate on the motion. I have Mr. Green, followed by Ms. Damoff. Mr. Green, go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And you'll note in the past, I've, as an opposition member of this committee, supported deeper dives into government dealings. I certainly support a greater inspection into what's happened here and a better understanding, and a request for having these witnesses, to me, make sense. But what I will tell you is one of the biggest frustrations I've had with this committee is when, and it's happened in the past, where you yourself, sir, have booked meetings without consulting the other parties, and I would reference the Bloc and the NDP or even the Liberal side when it comes to the committee work. And so while I'm supportive of this motion, what I'm not supportive of is the caveat that says that the committee seek additional resources to facilitate these meetings if necessary. To me, having learned from past mistakes, I'm going to go on the record and say I am no longer in support of a committee structure that allows a chair or the official opposition to direct the course of our work without consultations of the other parties. So for that reason, I'm going to put an amendment on this, and I'm going to move that we strike after it says forthwith and no less than. We strike from there forward, and we put in for 1 2-hour regularly scheduled meeting. For 1 2-hour regular scheduled meeting. And the reason why I do that is because I think that we can have all of the witnesses arrive, provide testimony with 5-minute openings, have the ability to question and examine and cross-examine, and only use one regularly scheduled meeting. So we're not in a scenario where you all are booking meetings without consulting the other parties, kind of at your convenience and your will. So that is the amendment that I put. I'm in support of pursuing this, but I'm not going to just give you the ability to do it kind of at your own leisure or prioritization.
All right. Thank you for that, Mr. Green. So just so that I'm clear, your move test for 1 2-hour regularly scheduled meeting, and I assume that you are keeping before June 20th, correct?
I mean,
I
I think, Mr. Chair, what needs to happen at this committee is we need to have a subcommittee that plans work in accordance with the courtesy of including the other parties on the work schedule. And so if we have a subcommittee that plans the work, and this is prioritized by way of a regular motion that is directed by committee, then yes, it would be before that. But what I do not want to do is give you the ability to determine when that's going to be without consultation to us. I would state, the obvious, which is that we're 25 members in our caucus without the infinite resources that both the government and the official opposition have. So we have to take our scheduling and our timing and our staffing into account when we make commitments for additional work. And this notion that when we don't concede to the whim of you as the chair, that we're somehow complicit in the cover-up is a cockamamie way of impugning what our work is here as New Democrats. And we even heard it today with these ridiculous references of an NDP Liberal government. I'm not on for that. But what I am on for is holding this government accountable. And what I am on for is using the traditional courtesy of our committee to have a planning committee that allows the committee to direct the work and not just the Conservative Party or you, sir, as chair.
Thank you. So we do have an amendment. On the amendment, any discussion on the amendment? Go ahead, Ms. Damoff.
Thank you, Chair.
On the amendment.
Yes, I know. Thank you, Chair. And I would just say that we have the commissioner here right now, and I know that it was very important to the committee that he be brought before the committee to offer testimony, and instead we've been sidetracked. He's already said that he's going to be looking into what he read in the newspaper, and so I think we should let him do his work, and so therefore I move to adjourn debate.
Okay. So we have a motion to adjourn debate on the motion amended by, or the proposed amendment by Mr. Green. There's no discussion on adjourning the debate on this motion, so do I have consensus? I'll ask for consensus. No? Okay. So we're going to go to recorded vote. Madam Clerk, on the motion by Ms. Damoff to adjourn debate. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Baines.
Yes.
Ms. Damoff.
Yes.
Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
Mr. Longfield.
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon.
Yes.
Mr. Barrett.
No.
Mr. Brock.
No.
Mr. Currick.
No.
Monsieur Fortin.
Oui.
Mr. Green.
No.
Yeas 6 pour 6, nays 4 contre 4.
Okay, so the motion carries to adjourn debate, so we are adjourning debate. We're returning to our next line of questioning. Mr. Currick, your time was concluded.
Just a point of order, Chair.
On what's the point of order, Mr. Currick?
So adjourn debate. Now, just for clarification, a motion to adjourn debate on the amendment to the motion. So does that adjourn debate on the entire debate on the motion?
That's correct,
or simply the amendment that was being debated?
It is to adjourn debate on the entire motion, including the proposed amendment. Now, a member can resume debate at any time at a future meeting that they have the floor on this matter, and we would continue on that, on the amendment as proposed by Mr. Green. And then, of course, the floor would be open for interventions at that point. Okay, so that's, does that clear it up? Okay, I have, so we're continuing again with the Commissioner. I have Mr. Baines for 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir. Just keep in mind, we've got till 1:30, and I'm going to need a little bit of time here for discussion on the issue that Mr. Baines brought up at the beginning of the meeting. Mr. Baines, go ahead for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you for your patience, Commissioner and Director. Thank you for joining us today. Can you please explain the difference between what a minister has to disclose in their disclosures versus a member of Parliament? Is there more scrutiny for either or?
Yes, I mean, the member of Parliament has to comply with the code, right, which sets out what you can do, what you can't do. Big exception, which we discussed at one point in time, for instance, was sponsored travel. There's no prohibition against sponsored travel for members of Parliament. However, once you become a parliamentary secretary or minister, yes, you have to live up to the Act, and the Act specifically specifies various things that you can or cannot do. One of them is, for instance, you cannot operate a company, you can't be involved in a company, you can own it, but you can't operate it. Another one is extensive provisions against gifts, provisions that controlled assets, what you may own or what you may not own, or what you have to put in blind trusts, etc. So it's a very complex set of regulations that are applied to what we call reporting public office holders, i.e. ministers and secretaries of states and basically OIC appointments. That's much more stringent, much more limiting than people who are elected at House of Commons. They obviously have to avoid conflict of interest, they have to recuse themselves, etc. But there's all sorts of outside activities that as a member of Parliament you can do which you can't do as a minister.
Do you believe your office has done enough to sort of educate the members on the differences between what rules are more stringent versus say an elected official?
Right. We try to educate as much as possible. We just developed an online tool for members of Parliament, which we give. Once you're elected, first of all you get a training from us. We are asked to. Then there's an online tool which walks you through the various possible situations and issues and how to resolve them, etc. We don't have one yet for ministers or reporting office holders, but we're in the process of developing that too. What we always think the best way is obviously for people not to get into conflict of interest is to be informed, to know what it is, etc. That's why we also, for every single person who falls under the quota, we appoint somebody in our office. This is your contact. If you have any issues, talk it to that person, and that person is there to help you. And you can always do more, etc. It also depends on how much time people want to spend on it. You're all very busy people. You have a lot of other things to do, and some of this is frankly speaking, tedious. And some people say, "I know this already." Others is very peculiar and very new to people, etc. So, to the extent that people are willing to learn and be educated, we provide as much as we can.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to share the rest of my time with Ms. Damoff.
Go ahead. Minute and 25 seconds, Ms. Damoff.
Oh, longer than I thought. Commissioner, I wonder if you could talk just briefly about how more rigorous the requirements are for ministers and parliamentary secretaries, not just on sponsored travel, but the actual form itself.
Okay, I think the expert on the form sits beside me, so Lynn.
So essentially, I would say the forms are pretty much identical between the MP code and the Act. Why? Because we ask for information about assets, liabilities, investments, companies, businesses. We ask about outside activities under both regimes. However, as the Commissioner explained, there are more stringent rules with regards to measures that reporting public office holders, including ministers, will have to abide by versus a member of parliament.
So things like not owning stocks, you can own mutual funds. Not having, you can't be actively involved in a company. You can still be part owner, but you have to put it in a blind trust, correct?
Correct. So those are measures that are required under the Conflict of Interest Act, so that reporting public office holders must divest of their controlled assets. They also must step down of any business.
So I only have a few seconds left, so I'm going to make a personal plea to the members of the Conservative Party to not put on social media
You're out of time, Ms.
to spam my office because I moved to adjourn debate. It is a personal plea to my colleagues.
You're out of time, Ms. Damoff. Thank you. Monsieur Fortin, 2 minutes et 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
You have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that the topic was already covered, but I would like to come back to it anyway. I just want to be sure that I understand. Mr. Commissioner, you will be doing an additional verification of what was seen in articles this morning from the Globe and Mail, I believe. Is that correct? We will look at the facts and determine whether or not we'll need to carry out an investigation. And the motion proposed by the Conservatives, we've adjourned debate, and I imagine we'll get back to that at a future meeting. And if that's the case, we would be interested to hear the results of the verifications you'll be doing. Do you know how much time it will take your office to get to the heart of the matter? Answer: it's quite difficult to give a timeline because I don't know the facts. If we determine that an investigation is needed, there's a process that will need to be followed. We'll have to notify the people who will be part of the investigation. We have 2 investigations on STDC. We started that 3 months ago, and it should be done in August. And so something like this generally takes a few months. And so we wouldn't be able to ask you to share a report with us before June 20th, I guess. I doubt that that'll be possible, indeed. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I don't have any other questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Fortin and Mr. Commissioner.
2.5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Mr. Commissioner, pursuant to subsection 27(1) of the Conflict of Interest Act, public office holders must divest each of their controlled assets within 120 days after the day on which they were appointed as a public office holder. What does your office do to ensure that this divestment has taken place?
Well, we notify, we are in contact with the registered public office holder and saying, you know, here was following, let's assume if we had identified certain issue like that, these things have to be put in blind trust. So we give them the information, and we will tell them, we will pay for the lawyer, we will pay for the blind trust, but you have to, up to this day, to do it. And then if we do not get a response within a reasonable time, we will say, look, you're already in day whatever X, and there's only this much time to, so get on with it, get it done, etc. We remind them, we push them slightly, and you know, everybody's interested in complying. Nobody wants to be offside the requirements of the commissioner.
If I could, what about the 120 days during which a public office holder is still in possession of the controlled assets? Do public office holders have to take any temporary measures to avoid conflicts of interest during that period?
Well, look, if they are controlled assets and you have to dispose of them and or put them in a blind trust, and obviously during that period of time you don't deal with them. I mean, it goes without saying. You have been appointed. We've identified these things. We say these are controlled assets that you are not entitled to hold. Get rid of them or put them in a blind trust. You're doing that. Then if during that period of time clear, you would be acting with them, you would be acting essentially in bad faith. And
just for the purpose of my very short time, it's your testimony here today that the moment somebody is appointed as a public office holder, at that moment, they then cease to be able to have any contact or control, despite the fact that there's a 120-day window.
No, that's not what I said at all. What I said is you have been appointed, we deal with you, we identify, you do your disclosure, and we identify certain assets that you are not allowed to hold. So you have then the choice of selling them or put them in a blind trust. The moment we tell you that, from that moment on, I don't think you can deal with them, because it has now been cleared. You know they can't hold us, and you can't deal with them. You have up to the end of the 120 days to either get rid of them or put them in a blind trust. Yet you're certainly not dealing with them in the meantime.
So if there was a deal made during that time, that would be in contravention?
Very quick response.
It has never happened, and I don't expect it to happen, because, you know, why would you do that? You have just been told by my office, these are things you shouldn't own. Get rid of them or put them in blind trust. If you're then dealing with them, surely you're not acting in good faith.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Mr. Commissioner, Ms. Robinson-Dalpy, on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank you for your appearance today, and appreciate the time that you've taken, and always appreciate the expertise and the work that you do. And I wanted to say thank you to your staff as well, Mr. Commissioner. Okay, thank you. Okay, before we conclude, Mr. Baines brought up an issue at the beginning of the meeting regarding the question of privilege. Just going to remind the committee as well that it's not up to the committee to determine whether a question of privilege happened. It's whether it touches on a question of privilege. There was a motion that was moved to report this to the House. The motion that was presented is debatable and amendable. We were in the middle of the debate last time. The meeting was adjourned, which therefore means that the debate of the motion was adjourned as well. So there are several options, and you know, obviously I'm going to seek committee guidance on this. The first option is that a member can move a motion to continue debate when they have the floor at the next meeting, at which point the debate would resume if a majority of members decide to resume debate. The other option because the plan, frankly, was to try to get to this report that we have sitting, the consideration of the draft report on the data collection technological tools, because I think it was the will of the committee to have this presented before Parliament rises. We haven't even started that at this point, but we can certainly go in that direction, or we can resume debate on the motion that was presented to report this to the House. So I'm seeking some feedback from committee members on this, on where they want to go in the next meeting. Mr. Barrett, go ahead.
Yeah, Chair. I would like to proceed with the consideration of the draft report. However, our last two meetings where we attempted to do that was unsuccessful. If the committee is going to be dealing with committee business, I would like to deal with the business that Mr. Kirk put forward today, and debate was adjourned on it, and I think that there is interest from members to consider that matter as well. So So if we're just going to be looking at business, what committee business we can be seized with, I think, based on the bombshells that dropped today, I'd be very interested in pursuing debate of Mr. Kirk's.
Okay, so I'm seeking guidance. I'm going to ask for quick interventions here because we do have 1:30 hard stop. Mr. Fisher and then Mr. Brock.
Thank you very much, and I certainly don't want to speak for Mr. Baines, but it was debated at length, mostly by the Conservatives. I'm sure that we could deal with it in 10 minutes, bring it to a vote, complete debate, and bring it to a vote, and then we could get it before the House pretty darn quickly.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brock?
Thank you. On the issue of committee business, I don't want the committee to lose sight of the fact that we still need to have a discussion on what to do with the RCMP documents and the documents received from Mr. Warnock.
Okay.
That's been on our agenda for a couple of weeks now, and I'd like to get to that.
Okay. All right. I appreciate the feedback. I'm going to take it back with the clerk. We're going to provide a notice of meeting probably by the end of today. So I'm just going to seek some guidance from the clerk, okay? That's all that I have for today. I want to wish everybody a great day. The meeting is adjourned.